Hi, and welcome to our webinar on how to take your business global. I'm Andrew Fahey. I'm the CEO of the Briars Group, and for the past 20 years, I've worked in the professional services arena across accounting, financial services, law, initially helping the global workforce, and then moving into large EOR, AOR providers, operating across EMEA, APAC, and North America. So hopefully lots of experience to share with you today. And I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Gemma.
Hi, I'm Gemma Bignell. I'm the CFO here at Briars. I've been here for 18 years. I'm a qualified accountant, and my time here has been spent mainly problem solving for our clients, taking them global, and imparting my expertise.
Okay, so what do we plan to cover today? We're initially going to look at why do businesses start to expand globally? What are the triggers that cause that to happen? And then once those events happen, how should businesses start to think through that and start to plan the process respectively? Once you've started that plan, what are the different options that are available to you to do this? Within each of those options, what are the opportunities, the risks, and the pitfalls? And then we're going to sort of step back and from the 30 years that the Briars has been doing this and our collective experience, give you some top tips and some advice around what we believe you should be doing to support your global expansion journey. And then there's an opportunity for you to ask some questions. So we sent out a request already, and the moderators today will gather those up. So it'll be live TV. It'll be a surprise for us when we get to those questions, but Joe and I will do our best to share them. And then we'll go into a little bit about Briars and how we believe we can support your global expansion journey. Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. Why do businesses look to expand globally? What happens? Well, it's usually some form of external event. And one of the most common things that we see are either businesses leading up to having investment in that business or businesses that have just been invested in, and the professional investor is now requiring them to grow more aggressively and more quickly. And global expansion is sort of becomes part of that strategy. So you're trying to attract investors, or you just attracted investors and now you're supercharging your growth. So that's one of the most common times we see businesses expanding globally. And then I guess a sort of a natural follow on from that are mergers and acquisitions as well. So a business that potentially has bought another business or is merging with a business that is either in a different geography or potentially sells products and services in a different geography. So all of a sudden your sales strategy, your expansion strategy changes for being predominantly domestic to that of now being a global strategy. And so everything changes and your experiences and your knowledge need to adapt. Then we have competitive threats. So you thought about expanding globally for a while, never got quite round to it, but your competitor has. Your competitor steals a bit of a march on you, and all of a sudden you're then reacting to that. And Gemma, do you wanna cover the next
Yeah,
two?
so the other one that we've commonly seen more recently, mainly due to COVID actually, is the expansion of finding people moving to different territories or talent acquisition. So where talent pools are in particular markets, for example, and therefore you're having to expand in order to attract those particular people. So that's more of a forced expansion and not necessarily so strategic, although we'll come on to that a bit later.
But the common theme through all of these are it was usually something that caught you a little bit by surprise, something that you're running really fast into, either because of an external factor or there's an opportunity that you're running towards. And hopefully that will come a little bit clearer throughout the webinar today to talk about some of the common pitfalls we see. So if they're the reasons why businesses start to consider global expansion, would you start? It's a big undertaking for any business when they start to operate outside of their geography, and the way that you do that can be really different. And we'll come on to lots and lots of things about that later on. But I guess And Gemma, let's just sort of chat through these, and
Yeah.
we'll think about them as we go. But I guess the thing that we always try to encourage our clients to do right off the start is to understand why you're looking to do this, which sort of goes against, Gemma, some of those reasons before. So it's been done to
Does.
you, but we actually sort of almost advocate, just pause, take a breath. Why do you want to do this? Do you want to become a global powerhouse that has business, that has sort of property and businesses all around the globe? Or are you just trying to take opportunity of a great manager that you fired that just happens to be
Mhm.
in a different country?
Yeah, not a decision to be made lightly, definitely not. And lots of considerations to make sure that it's the right thing for your business, and that you'll do it in the right way. And that's where hopefully we can impart some of that knowledge as we go through.
And and the reason why it's important, and we'll get to that later on, is that you'll be faced with a variety of decision trees as we move forward. And some of those decisions will be heavily influenced by your strategic rationale. So if you
Mm,
haven't thought through the strategic rationale, we won't know the best route to take. And each
yeah.
of those routes has different opportunities and different risks as well.
Yeah, and where
Um,
your team is kind of they're so focused on what they're doing day to day, they're not going to necessarily have the knowledge to be able to take you to that next level or the time even to be able to impart and make sure that the planning stage is completely complete.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the things that I've experienced when I've done it in my career, and we see lots and lots of our clients' experience is any business that has people sat on the bench with enough time to be able to expand their business globally has probably got not doing something right with their in-country profitability. And so most businesses have a leadership team and a management team and an operational team that's perfectly tuned to deliver that in-country performance. So when you talk now about expanding globally and operating in different regions, it's really important that you make sure you ring fence enough bandwidth, enough expertise, and really think about that capacity planning,
Mhm.
because it's not something to do lightly, and it's not something to give somebody as the 10th or 11th thing on their to-do list as well. It's only going
Definitely
to
not.
bring mistakes in to do that. And I guess that's where the fractional type support idea comes in as well. So undoubtedly expanding globally is a different skill set. There's a different set of expertise. So where you can bring in expert knowledge and use that knowledge and learn from that knowledge and deploy it for a period of time and then let go of that cost when you don't need it again, that's certainly something that we advocate businesses to do, Gemma.
Yeah, definitely. And using those, it's the having the knowledge that you don't necessarily have in-house. You won't need it forever, but certainly each of the jurisdictions is particularly specific. So therefore, you should utilize the support that is out there for you.
So if that's why businesses start to think about global expansion and then a really high level to-do list of what we should plan, I guess now you're there, you're now thrust into this world of new jargon, just like any sector and any business, I suppose, Gemma. There's a whole host of stuff. So for as much as we've said, well, stop, plan, think about it, bring expertise in, undoubtedly most businesses will conduct some desktop research, would have spoke to people. So all this new stuff's coming into your world, and people are saying things like, well, have you thought about entity setup versus an RER versus EOR, AOR, PEO, and you can
All those
see why
acronyms.
yeah, and you can see why some businesses just go, not for me. I have enough acronyms. Thank you very much for one lifetime. And this is something, Gemma, we see an
Yeah,
awful lot, either a
an
little bit
awful
of
lot.
knowledge or a lot of knowledge or
So
confused.
there's a lot of jargon out there, and we'll take you through that on the next few slides. So opening an entity. This is where you're going to take your business global. Involves creating your name in any of the jurisdictions that you choose. There are considerations to think of from a people point of view, so directors, obviously the legal and compliance. There's a more of a heftier cost with regards to this and an ongoing cost when you're looking at an entity setup.
This is probably what most people will consider what global expansion is. And it's, we'll touch on this a little bit as we go through the conversation, but there's lots of marketing collateral and noise in the marketplace around it. Take your business global, expand
Hmm.
global, when actually they mean engage an overseas worker or payroll a worker in a different entity. This is actually what I suppose a layman will consider, that you have actually created a business in another country and you're therefore complying with the local regulatory requirements of that business, of that country as well.
Yeah.
That a fair sort of summary, Gemma?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fair to remember that also you've got those compliance points when you remove yourselves from those countries too. So you're not just signing up for that initial buzz and that expansion part, but actually you're signing up almost for life. You think of it as a marriage. You are going to have to divorce at some point and get out of there, and that can be just as painful as going in. So it's definitely worth considering as to whether or not there is potentially a stopgap before you go for the full-on entity. Okay, so NRER, also known as the non-resident payroll registration. We like to think of this more as your try before you buy option. You can set up a payroll registration only without actually creating an entity. So it could be a payroll registration of your UK company, for example. It'll allow you to employ in the jurisdiction, but those employees remain employees of your company. So they have the contract of employment. Obviously, you then have the risks and rewards of that employment directly.
What One of the things that both of these versions, the entity setup and NRER, have in common for me are a commitment to the company you're expanding into. And so you think back to the advice we talked about before about thinking about the strategic direction. If you want to, for example, integrate yourself into the Canadian business community, then creating an entity showing that you're paying the local taxes, employing people through the local authorities shows a commitment to that. And that can be really important as well. Now, if you're just planning to let's say as a recruitment business, just place a worker there, may be less important. But both of these sort of have what I would call more traditional feels and actually a bit of a
Mhm.
commitment to the local region that you're in as well.
Yeah, and could absolutely be more a cultural fit for your
Hmm.
business with regards to the fact that they are your employees. So stock options, those sorts of incentives that you might want to give may not be applicable with any of the other options we're going to show you. So, employer of record, or commonly known as EOR, it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment. It's out there a lot and probably quite confusing. So, this is where a third party employer will take on the risks and rewards of your employees. Their contract of employment will be with that third party. This is a great option for when you want to have small numbers. You maybe have recognise that talent pool, and it's potentially a position that wouldn't necessarily create a taxable presence. So, especially when you're looking at benefits and minimum numbers for benefits, this enables you to provide quite a good remit around an individual. And again, with the try before you buy, it kind of does give you that option really to put somebody into a country, see whether things work, really think about it before you create a footprint. A great short-term gap in most scenarios.
Yeah, I think the pace is important here as well. If you think back to
Very.
right at the start where we said most of the time this gets done to you. So
Mhm.
we've just found a great person for the role. However, they operate in France or Germany or Spain, for example, then actually an EOR allows you to move swiftly. They already have the infrastructure set up to allow you to do this as well. Um, AOR, or agent of record, just like Gemma explained, therefore EOR works in a similar way. However, the way to think about this is rather than it be an employee, it's a contracted entity. So in the supply chain of the client, the AOR provider will sit there. And usually this is where you are engaging a worker that's self-employed, maybe an independent contractor or an IC through their own business. And it creates a contractual relationship between the supplying business, and they sit there and take care of all the contractual and payment and admin overheads for you.
Yeah, great option when you've got that multi, you know, employment stroke contractor mix. And PEO, so commonly used interchangeably with EOR and AOR, sometimes out in the market. PEO is a co-employment. This stemmed from the US and is actually really only used in the US in its traditional form of the co-employment. The EOR is kind of the international flavour of a PEO and is the compliance version of that in other jurisdictions.
Yeah, and as Gemma said right at the start of this, lots of jargon, and hopefully that's
Mhm.
helped explain it a little bit more. But they are used interchangeably, sometimes correctly, sometimes incorrectly. Sometimes they mean different things in different regions as well. So I guess our
Yes.
overarching advice here is, you know, sometimes it's easy to explain what it is you're trying to achieve. So I have a worker overseas that I want to employ and I don't know how, and then let the advisor who's helping you figure out what it should be. Sometimes we get people say, "Hey, I need a PEO," and after speaking to them, they don't actually. They're trying to
Yeah.
set up a business in a different country. But that's the same as any industry. Jargon can be complicated, and it's often used to make things sound a little bit harder than what they are as well. So we said earlier on that we'd share some examples that we see on a regular basis. So over the last 30 years of trading for Briars, and then over my career and Gemma's career as well, we both, all of us, had this sort of really broad spectrum of experiences. And so when we were pulling this webinar together, we sort of tried to brainstorm one of the most common things that sort of always happens, and here's our go, and we'll chat through them, and hopefully they're useful. So the first is inexperienced leadership, and we touched on this about capacity early on, but it is difficult to take your business globally in the true sense of the word. It can be costly, it absorbs a lot of time, and you want to make sure you do it correctly. And we see a lot of businesses who start this who've not probably thought through the bandwidth overhead and the experience overhead, and have probably left themselves a little bit short, and sometimes that results in them making the wrong decision. Gemma, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. And even as simply as not understanding the other jurisdictions. So, for example, a client that sent their worker to work in the UK got to Heathrow and then realised they had no visas. It's sometimes as simple as that, but obviously can be as big as the capacity planning and making sure that everything is covered. But understanding those nuances, if the team don't, then you're open to pitfalls.
Yeah, and I think that covers inexperienced leadership and bandwidth. This is
Yeah,
hard. Give it the best chance of success. Bring expertise in where you don't have it. Allocate time in people's lives to do that. And as and within that, that's where ROI is important as well. The
hmm
amount of times we say to people, "Well, what are you trying to achieve? What does success look like?" And they sort of stop and pause for a moment. Oh, don't really know. And it sounds comedic, but if you've got to take your business globally and commit the time, effort, and money, just the amount of businesses that we see who've probably not thought about what good looks like.
yeah, and
It's really
the
hard to know
footprint.
if you've got there.
Definitely. The footprint question is huge, I think, with regards to do you really want an entity at that first juncture, or do you want to try one of the other options just to see if the market works? Because once you've made that footprint, your name's there, and
Mhm.
that's very difficult to backtrack from. Whereas if you're putting yourself actually more in one of those, halfway houses for a little while and you're testing, then you can make the right decisions a little bit further down the line. And that will save some of the pain of having to maybe pull out if things don't work.
Mhm. The next point we've just touched on a lot, but just to reiterate, this is where people read marketing for a type of solution which isn't relevant to their need. So they a solution that's designed to engage a global worker, but they're trying to fit that to a need where they have to open an entity in another country. So just we see lots of businesses get confused by the jargon and the marketing messages, where actually we need to see advice.
Yeah, and the permanent establishment risk, or we also call this taxable presence risk. So, with regards to what is the employee going to be doing, are you actually generating revenue in those jurisdictions? They can actually provide. In fact, they drive which route you actually have to go down in some circumstances. And it's just being aware of what those rules and regulations are to make sure that you're not going to fall foul of them,
Mhm.
and having that advisor that can take you through that and explain, can mitigate that risk. And it is a risk for the business if you're
Yeah.
found to be non-compliant.
Yeah, and that can be a really costly one, and
Yeah.
hopefully mitigated by the advice we gave earlier on about planning and really
Mhm.
understand what you need to do. But it happens, and I see classification flows on for that. So this is the independent contractor classification. So Gemma talked before around this new modern multifaceted workforce where you have a mixture of employees, self-employed people, potentially in your country and without. And each country has its own way of classifying if you're an employed worker or a self-employed worker. And most of those countries have penalties and risk with doing that wrong. So if you accidentally classify somebody as self-employed when they should have been employed, you can be accidentally incurring employment taxes and
Mhm.
penalties in the regions that you expand to. So we see people get that workforce mapping wrong as well quite a lot.
Yeah. And then with regards to the audit trigger, so the audit rules and regulations, specifically in the UK, but elsewhere in the world too, relate to the whole group. So it's very easy to set up what you think is going to be a very small entity, but actually by creating that small entity, you've actually created quite a large compliance headache for yourselves. And those that can be really costly, from a professional time point of view, from an internal time point of view, because your team are then having to spend time going through those audit queries too. And that is, across the board, we're seeing those sorts of requirements, and not understanding them fully can obviously cost dearly.
Yeah. I think the next 2 points probably should be the other way around, Gemma. So you
They
go
probably
ahead with
should
transfer
be.
pricing, I'll do the next one.
Okay, so the transfer pricing. So this is with regards to when you're setting up an entity, how is that entity going to be funded? How is it going to be directly revenue trading? So are you going to be contracting with direct clients in that particular jurisdiction? Or is that entity there as a support function for your parent entity? And therefore there should be a transfer pricing study undertaken. We know from our experience how much they can cost. And actually, it just needs to be thought about on how that looks. And obviously, if you're a trading entity, well, then what does your invoicing format look like? What's the compliance around your VAT? All of those sorts of things then actually all come into play. So there's quite a lot to think about when you're actually, it's not just do I need an entity, it's what type of entity,
Mhm.
how am I going to be trading, transfer pricing. Yeah, the list is endless, unfortunately.
Yeah. And then the last one, cultural integration, pretty sort of self-explanatory, but any business that expands globally now has to face additional language barriers,
Mhm.
and different sort of cultural integrations. But this actually flows through every part of the business, the language you use, the phraseology you use, the culture that you're trying to build, whether you're buying that in or you're creating that entity and that from scratch. And back to needing the right bandwidth and expertise, really bringing in people that understand that human development, and capital development strategy planning in each region is really key. And we see lots of businesses get that wrong and ultimately end up churning workforce as a result of it, which would be sort of really counterintuitive to the expansion strategy that
Yeah.
they're looking to implement.
There's also the reputational risk in those instances. So, especially when you're looking at talent pools, if you get it wrong when you first go in, then actually that ripples. So, making sure, I think that the one piece of advice is it's not one size fits all. And it's, you need to be thinking about exactly which jurisdictions and what applies in those jurisdictions specifically.
So our top tips for global expansion, and you for the eagle-eyed, you'll see we've sort of covered these throughout the conversation. But number one, make sure you have a clear plan. What is the strategic goal? You can't be sure that the decisions you're making are taking you in the right direction if you don't really know how to get there. Um, I think the second thing is resource. That if you do not prepare properly for global expansion and have the right resource, the right skills, and the right capacity, it's really hard to get people in your leadership team to absorb a entirely new region as well as their own.
Mhm. Yeah, and then, we're looking at the fractional resources. I think it's a great way of bolstering your existing team and making sure that actually those bolt-ons enable you to get the skill set required to make sure that you do this right.
Yeah, and that and the next one sort of flows into the marketing messaging point that global expansion is basically replicating your business in a different region. So it's not just about the pace of payroll. It can be if you're just trying to payroll a worker overseas,
Mhm.
but in many cases we see people that sort of go down the global workforce route when they meant global expansion and hadn't really considered the accounting, tax, HR, legal, cultural integration elements. And I guess the summary of that is the earlier you can integrate a strategic partner that can help with this, it alleviates the bandwidth and it alleviates the knowledge part as well. Quite exciting, this part, really. We haven't seen these questions until they've been put in, so actually we can probably handle these, Gemma.
I'm hoping so.
Um, Okay, so why not just use an EOR? Well, I think we just covered that really. So hopefully that was submitted prior to us doing the last slide.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we failed on the last slide. But EOR is a great tool for businesses that want to quickly engage a worker, not have to think about employing them directly, potentially in other regions. If your strategic plan, though, is to expand your business into different territories and actually have physical presence, integrate with the local cultures, then there will become a time where EOR isn't the right solution for them, and understanding when that is the right trigger for when an EOR is relevant and when it's not.
Yeah. Shall I take number 2?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. How far can PE risk go back? Wow, what a question. And I think it's a little bit, there's not a one size fits all on that. If this has come from a specific requirement, we probably need to speak a bit further. Um, it will depend on the jurisdictions involved. It will depend on the amounts of revenue involved too. And it would be on a case by case basis. So if you've submitted that question, it's probably a good idea for us to touch base separate to the webinar.
Okay, and third, can Briars help with my growth plan? The answer is yes and no to this, depending on
Mm,
what you mean by that. So yes, as in we provide fractional finance resource that can help you build a forecast and a budget and help you think through the cost profile and the growth profile and how the multiple currencies all sort of interact and how that works. We can definitely do that. We can uh, you can learn from the 3,000 other businesses we've helped before. Our
mhm,
advisors will share experiences and we can do that. Today, we don't have specific sales and marketing as one of our fractional services, if that's what you mean. It is something that is on our roadmap that we're considering, but if it's can we be a business development resource? No. Can we help build financial growth plans? Yes. Can we help give you sort of the benefits of our years of experience? Most definitely. I think we got off quite lightly there, Gemma. If
I
the,
think so.
if there are any other questions, submit them, and if not, feel free to reach out after. So shameless plug time. Genuinely, how can we help with your global expansion journey? We've been doing this a long time. We've been doing this for 30 years. You've met Gemma and myself today. We provide services across global accounting, HR, tax, payroll, foreign exchange, global mobility solutions. We have a global network that we integrate together and provide dedicated client services managers to you as one point of contact. So, Gemma, anything you want to add to that?
I don't think so. I think it's just fair to say that, we're here as problem solvers to help. What we would really like, though, is to be at the start of the journey. Problem solving is great, but we'd much rather help you do it properly to begin with.
This is a really loose methodology of how we help any business that comes to us. So the first thing we do is we sit down with them and we go through a discovery session. What is it you're trying to achieve? What do you do now? What experiences do we have? What's your overall measures of success? And once we've done this, we help work with that leadership team to produce a proposal. And I think the great thing that Briars offers is doesn't matter to us whether it's an entity setup, NRER, EOR, AOR, PEO, whether it's any of those, because we provide all of those services, all of that support mechanism. So a real sort of non-biased proposal. And our overarching requirement is to create long-standing relationships and partnerships approach as well. So we have no desire to be a transactional type relationship with our clients. We want to create this long-standing partnership approach.
So, one of our case studies that we've included here is PubNub, and when we've gone through the previous slides, we've alluded to all of the different options out there. PubNub are quite a great example with regards to how each of these options can be used to strengthen your journey. So they came to us before, they wanted to grow, weren't really sure how to do it or where to do it. We have helped them with regards to creating an entity in Estonia. We have EORs in Hong Kong, Singapore, India, and a full entity here in the UK too. So they've really kind of tested each of those options, and we've been with them every step of the way, making sure that everything's in place when it needs to be, that they're on top of their compliance. That's something that their team, internal team, haven't necessarily needed to worry about so much. We've taken that from them and left them to do what they do best, which is running their own business.
So we sort of chunk our business up into 4 areas. We have our corporate services, so all the services that we deliver to the business across accounting, tax, the whole plethora of outsourced accounting services and solutions, from one-off engagements of fractional FD resource to completely running finance functions for teams. We then have our people services division, which is the same, but on the HR side. So anything to do with people processes, benefits, again, ranging from HR director services to hiring, firing, mobility across the whole spectrum.
And then we
You
have
want
our
to do?
payroll services. Sorry, Andrew. With workforce and employment status, it's running the payroll from start to finish in most of the jurisdictions, and the PEO that we EOR. And again, we interchange it too. So there's that as our service delivery. As we said, it's options and it depends on what is right for the business as to which one we would go for. The workforce services is with regards to that global workforce that we were talking about. So your independent contractors, your self-employed, all of the different realms of what that looks like, and making sure that actually you're looking after them too. And we're helping you to do that. So we're checking out their tax solutions, their statuses, making sure you're compliant, making sure they're compliant, and just providing that wraparound service. Cradle to grave, we'd like to say.
Mhm. So first of all, thank you. Thank you for giving up your time, some great questions. We can see a few more in the chat we haven't got time to get back to, but we will follow on with these. We'll provide access to the slides. We will put the webinar on the website. Any business that's sat there thinking, I'm either more confused or that sounds like me, we offer, initial consultations where we'll help you think through that. And for ongoing bits of advice, register for the Beyond Borders podcast, follow us on LinkedIn, where we're constantly pushing proactive information.
Yeah, we'd be delighted to help with any of your requirements. And we're here to hopefully make things just that little bit clearer.